Let's take a quick look at the foot of the Victoria Tower because we're just getting ready for some of the pageantry to get underway. And this is where the Queen's carriage will arrive in, what is it, maybe half an hour's time, maybe a little more than that. This is the point at which we have our dismounted detachment of the Household Cavalry being led into the Royal Staircase and the area at the foot of the tower. The lifeguards in the scarlet tunics and the blues and royals in the navy tunics smartly making their way in, and they will line the royal staircase, providing a guard of honour for Her Majesty's arrival. And that'll be, as I say, in about half an hour's time. Lots of these, by the way, are young recruits. They are still in training with the Household Cavalry, so this is a very big day for them. I'm sure there's a few nervous participants there today, but this is a great day for them to be taking part in one of the big parliamentary ceremonial events, and of course one of the big ceremonial events of the British calendar, full stop. It is that big and it is that powerful. So that's our first glimpse there of the ceremonial getting underway, with the Household Cavalry taking pride of place on the royal staircase, all the way up to the Norman Porch, as it's called. That is the kind of landing area there, which is where the Queen will be appearing in a short while and making her way into the robing room, which is just on the left-hand side of the screen there, where the crown will be placed and the royal procession will start. So neatly in place, very smartly in place. The Household Cavalry there, as I say, with lots of the young recruits who've been chosen to take part in the state opening today. I'm bound to say, Andrew, you must have felt slightly outnumbered at doing that conversation. Yes, yes, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I thought you might say that. I thought you might say that. But the fundamental issue is, no matter what you say about the legislation that's proposed or the quality of it or the effect it might have on people, if there is little chance of it being put into effect, or if you are a government right now which would face, let's just say, a lot of difficulty enacting this legislation, you're bound to ask, what is the point of it? That is a perfectly reasonable question.
It is a perfectly reasonable question. But you touched on something there, Hugh, a second ago when we watched the Household Cavalry lining the steps. You said it's one of the great events in the British parliamentary calendar, and that's absolutely right. But we haven't had one of these for 841 days. It's been 2.5 years since the last time we had a Queen's speech. In fact, the last time that a session of Parliament lasted this long was before the English Civil War. This session of Parliament needed to come to an end, a new one needed to begin, and that's why we're having a Queen's speech today.
Well, you're talking about tradition, and here we have the Yeomen of the Guard. These are the oldest of the royal bodyguards. I like to remind people that they were created by a semi-Welshman, Henry Tudor, back in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth, although I think lots of Welsh people claim him as a full Welshman. I think he was a quarter Welsh, maybe that's good enough. So Henry Tudor created the Yeomen of the Guard back in 1485. It's the oldest military corps in existence in Britain. These are veterans of the armed services who are taking part in the ceremony today in their distinctive red Tudor uniform, looking very smart indeed, being led into the Royal Gallery by the captain. The captain of the Yeomen of the Guard, by the way, is a political appointment, and it is the government deputy chief whip in the House of Lords. Traditionally, the government deputy chief whip in the Lords is the captain of the Yeomen of the Guard. So they will form a guard of honour in the Royal Gallery, either side there, because this is where the procession will take place later on, what we call the procession in state, where the Queen and the imperial state crown, that great symbol of royal authority, they'll be making their way along the pathway there towards the ceremonial pathway towards the Prince's chamber, the Prince's room, which is next to the House of Lords. So that's a nice sight for us to see, with the Royal Gallery itself, which is now full of the guests, and of course the House of Lords, which later on will be listening to the speech of the Queen. And Joanna Cherry, maybe you want to tell us who that is?
That's Lady Hale.
Yes, and who's Lady Hale, Joanna?
She is the President of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom.
She is indeed, and played a very significant role recently in that judgment on prorogation, which you were part of, especially in the Scottish legal context.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important to remember that how we come to have this Queen's speech today, it was all part of a ruse by Boris Johnson to suspend Parliament because it was getting in his way, because he doesn't have a majority. I mean, this is just the most ridiculous flummery. So I know some people like this kind of thing, and, you know, for those who like that kind of thing, that is the kind of thing they like, as Miss Jean Brodie once said. But it's happening in the middle of a constitutional crisis. We are looking at crashing out of the European Union with disastrous economic consequences for all the nations of these islands in a matter of days. And this is distraction therapy for the Tories. Yeah. Maybe Boris Johnson wants to have a Queen's speech because he knows he's not going to last very long, and this is the only punt he's going to get at it.
When Joanna mentioned crashing out, you were saying no. Yeah. Why are you so confident about that?
Well, I'm absolutely confident that the Prime Minister is determined to get a deal with the EU. That's why they're engaged right now in negotiations with the European Union in Brussels as we speak. It's absolutely within reach. I mean, we are very close to getting a deal that would be good for the country. And the only people that seem to be taking us towards a no-deal cliff edge are those who are refusing to countenance backing the Prime Minister when he brings a deal back, and that includes, unfortunately, the SNP, the Liberal Democrats, and the Labour Party.
Any old deal just to save your Prime Minister's
Then you back a no deal by definition,
no.
Joanna. If you don't back the deal, you're backing a no deal.
It's not as simple as
Jenny,
that. You know
from
that
your
very
point of
well.
view, some of your colleagues may consider backing a deal that Boris Johnson brings back. What would you be saying to them?
I don't think we are going to see as many of my colleagues backing a deal as been reported. I mean, I was asked last night, will it be 20 or 30? And I just think that's just pie in the sky. Yes, there are many Labour MPs who would like a deal. They would like a good deal, and we've described what that deal ought to look like. But when you have what it looks to be, if you can believe any of the briefings that we're getting, is a May deal minus the things that Labour MPs fought to get in there around workers' rights, environmental protections and food safety and what have you, they're not going to vote for that. You know, that isn't going to happen.
Do you think that, Ed, do you think that there is a possibility, at least, that the Prime Minister will get some kind of deal, that it'll involve clearly an element of compromise, maybe a compromise that some people will not be able to stomach, whether they're in the ERG or whether they're in the DUP, but that he does stand a chance by now because of the pressure of getting something together? What would be the response in the Commons to that?
Well, there must be a possibility of getting a deal, and I don't want to predict whether it would get through the House of Commons. I can speak for the Liberal Democrats, and the Liberal Democrats want to stop Brexit, so we will vote against a deal. However, what's been interesting in cross-party talks, including some Tory rebels, is there is a group of people, I think, potentially even majority, who would be willing to back a deal if it went back to the people, with Remain being on the ballot paper. And if one's looking for consensus, if one's looking to try to end this, to bring people together, then that may be a way forward. Liberal Democrats and Joe Swinson, our leader, will be arguing for that. And I think you could see people holding their noses and saying, because this will go back to the people, and Liberal Democrats have argued for a people's vote for the last 3 years, because it will go back to the people, let this deal go forward, as long as the ballot paper has the option of remaining in the EU.
Let's go back to the ceremonial, which Joanna was being slightly, I don't know, was it insulting about it? You call it flummery, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I mean,
She wants to leave the country, so it's
well, no,
not surprising
I
that she's
don't
not a
want to
fan.
leave the country. I want Scotland and England to become separate independent nations. We don't live in a country, we live in a union of nations.
Well, what we can say safely is that Wales, Scotland, England and Northern Ireland have got their own traditions, and this is part of the tradition in Parliament. How was that? Was that neat? Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Some of the United Kingdom is a country as well.
So these are the gentlemen at arms, and they play a prominent role again in the state opening, because they are again a form of royal bodyguard. We mentioned the yeomen, who were set up by Henry VII, Henry Tudor. Well, these were set up by Henry VIII. Slow march into the Royal Gallery. They celebrated their 510th anniversary this year. A decade ago, the Queen was paying tribute to them on their 500th anniversary as her nearest guard. And although the yeomen were set up before them, the gentlemen at arms are the more senior grouping, because they are classed as gentlemen rather than yeomen. So that is the difference in status. Now, they're making their way towards the Prince's chamber. The captain, again, is a political appointment. The captain of the Honourable Corps of Gentlemen-at-Arms is the government chief whip in the House of Lords, Lord Ashton of Hyde, who was appointed in July this year. So this is his first grand ceremonial as government chief whip and in this role as captain of the Gentlemen-at-Arms, leading them there into the Prince's chamber, ready for the Queen's arrival. And here's the scene outside on what's been a rather damp start to the day. In fact, at 6 this morning, it was pouring with rain. And it's still looking quite damp, isn't it? But what we have here is the regalia procession, as it's known. This is the procession that brings the crown and the cap of maintenance and the sword of state to the Palace of Westminster, those three great symbols of royal authority, accompanied by the Crown Jeweller and other senior officers. And this will make its way into the Sovereign's entrance. And they are using the Queen Alexandra State Coach today, which was built originally in 1865. So the regalia, by the way, coming from the palace today, of course, most of it kept at the Tower of London, but transferred to the palace overnight. And then we'll see the regalia being transferred now at the foot of the Victoria Tower, ready for it to be taken into the regalia room at the foot of the tower and then up into the Royal Gallery, where it'll be put on display. So let's see the arrival here. An interesting feature here is that the state ceremonies feature the Queen's barge master and the Queen's waterman in the roles of footmen. There they are, and they are a reminder that in days gone by the crown jewels will be brought down to Westminster by river, because that was a rather safer route than coming down from Westminster by road. We have several new faces in the ceremony today, including the new controller of the Lord Chamberlain's office in the palace, in Buckingham Palace, Michael Vernon, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Vernon, with a long distinguished military career. He's now in this post, took over from Andrew Ford. So he's waiting there just at the foot of the stairs, and the Crown Jeweller will bring out the Imperial State Crown with its 3,000 gemstones, only seen at coronations and at state openings of Parliament. So it's a rare sight. Michael Vernon, in his first state opening, ready to take the crown into the regalia room, where it'll be placed on a different kind of cushion to be taken up to the Royal Gallery to be put on display there until the Queen's arrival. I mentioned too that that is just one of 3 symbols of royal authority that we will see today. The other 2, which will also be put on display in the Royal Gallery, are the cap of maintenance, as it's called, and the sword of state. Sword of state, which dates from 1685 and the coronation of James II. You can just about see it there. And then to the right of the sword of state, as we'll see the procession going into the stairs, there we can see the cap of maintenance, the crimson velvet and the ermine, all symbols of the monarch's power. So just a few minutes inside there to get things nice and neat and ready, to make sure that everything is pristine before it is brought into the Royal Gallery. So we'll see it being transferred in just a few minutes' time. So just these elements of the ceremonial which lead up to one thing, and that is the Queen's arrival, and then the Queen's procession through the Royal Gallery into the House of Lords, where she will then summon members of the House of Commons. We'll see that a little later on. The new Black Rod, we have a lady usher of the Black Rod for the first time in hundreds of years, and we'll see the Black Rod summoning MPs in that famous scene, knocking the door, asking for entry and bringing the MPs to the House of Lords to listen to the speech itself. So, yes, Joanna, we're quite enjoying a bit of drama. Yes.
Oh yes, it's very enjoyable.
Yes, it's very enjoyable.
But I don't really see how it moves the current political situation
So
forward any way.
I think it would be difficult to see the Yeomen of the Guard moving the Brexit process forward, wouldn't
Indeed.
it? Anyway, I mean, they may have a view on it.
Maybe that's the answer.
It may be the solution.
Yes.
It may be the solution here. After 3.5 years of politicians going round and round and round the
Yes.
same mulberry bush, it may well be
Yes,
that's the solution.
I think you're absolutely right.
But I've just been watching these pictures, and it just occurs to me, this is the last time I've seen anything line up in a straight line in an orderly fashion in Parliament for quite some months
Yes,
now.
yeah, I think that's a
And
perfectly fair
listening
comment.
to these four, you know, I mean, there is nothing certain about what is going to happen next, because there is already, even before we've seen the shape of a deal that may or may not come back from Brussels, the three big blocs, opposition parties are sure that their front bench is not going to back it, even though they haven't seen it yet. The Conservatives are sure that they'll try and kind of ram it through if it does exist. But none of those things actually give us any certainty as to what the outcome would be.
Andrew, as we look at these images, and now these are
Straight lines.
This is the formal moving of the crown to the Royal Gallery, where it's put on display. It's the symbol of the Queen's authority. It's a symbol of the Queen's power. The crown originally made for George VI and remodelled back in 1952-3 for the Queen's own coronation. It's very heavy, by the way. It weighs at least 2.5 pounds, which may be why the Queen's decided not to wear it today. And who can blame her? But as we look at this, Andrew, I'm bound to say, how do you respond to the very serious accusations that the Queen has been treated disrespectfully in this process, in this political process, that she's been put in a difficult position by Downing Street and by Boris Johnson, and that this is an inappropriate way to deal with Her Majesty? What's the response to that?
Well, those are very, very serious allegations, and I think I would refute them, and I know that Number 10 would refute them completely. I mean, the government has never sought to put Her Majesty in a difficult position throughout this entire process. We have acted with complete probity and within the law, and we are respecting the age-old traditions of the Queen reopening Parliament after prorogation, which is what we're seeing here today. I have to say, watching the images, actually, I'm very fond memories of when I was actually outside lining the streets for the 2008 state opening when I was serving with the Royal Navy, when I never for one moment thought I'd be sitting inside the building watching the events. So for all the comments on flummery and ceremony, it really does mean something to a lot of people out there.
Well, we'll mention the streetliners later because, to be fair, they've got a pretty hard task today in this weather on the streets. So we'll mention them later on and give them full credit. Some raised eyebrows because you've said you acted lawfully. That clearly wasn't the case, was it, where it came to the prorogation? Because the Supreme Court made that very clear.
Well, we acted. The government acted within what it thought the law was at the time. As the Attorney General made clear in Parliament, in issuing the judgment as they did, they created new law. And we abided by that new law, and Parliament returned, and the government, in proroguing for a second time, acted within the auspices of the new law as set down by the Supreme Court. So we've the entire way through acted with complete probity and in no way sought to bring put the Queen into an unenviable or uncomfortable position. That's certainly not been the aim of this government.
Let's just take a look inside the Royal Gallery again, a little closer if we can, at the cap of maintenance and the sword of state, because why don't I just say a couple of words about these things. Why a cap of maintenance? Well, that is traditionally, or was traditionally, many centuries ago, a kind of gift given by the Pope to monarchs that the Pope favoured. And then became a tradition to carry it through the City of London on a stick, just to show that the Pope was favouring the current monarch. So that is a symbol of the monarch's authority still. And the sword of state, of course, well, that is because it's been associated with coronations, as I say, since the coronation of James II in 1685. So they always play a part, and they will be carried in the procession by two very distinguished figures, former Chief of the Defence Staff and the current leader of the House of Lords. So that's how the regalia is included in the ceremonial procession itself. The heralds are now making their way from the Prince's chamber, led by the Garter King of Arms, Thomas Woodcock there, down to the Norman porch where they will be waiting for the Queen's arrival. The heralds, who are in charge of all heraldic records in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, not in Scotland, but in the other three countries. And they are indeed charged with, I suppose, licensing heraldic developments and putting their seal of approval on new heraldic names and new heraldic agreements. That is their principal duty. So they take a part. And of course, the role of the Garter King of Arms goes back to the 15th century. So we are really delving into the distant past, the Tudor and medieval past, when we look at the heralds themselves making their way to the foot now of the royal staircase, ready for the Queen's arrival, which will take place maybe in about 10 minutes' time, 15 minutes' time. So that's the latest part of the ceremonial taking on. And we were talking there, of course, about the role of the crown and how the crown has become, according to some people, too closely involved or dragged in, if you like, into the political process. That's been one aspect of all of this. The other aspect has been, I suppose, the relationship between the executive, in other words, government, and Parliament itself. Now, Laura, start us off on this one, because given the role of the House of Commons especially, and the role of the Speaker, which has been quite a controversial one, but a very important one. How have you seen that playing out between Downing Street and government and Parliament itself?
I think it's become very hostile. I mean, since Boris Johnson's been in office, it's sort of a very rapid acceleration of what was already a big tension between Theresa May when she was in Downing Street and Parliament was blocking her attempts to get a deal. I mean, remember, she had those catastrophic defeats of the deal that she put together with the EU. And there was a huge amount of tension between Downing Street and Parliament. Even then, as I'm sure Andrew might remember, he had the lucky duty of being Theresa May's PPS, a sort of very close ally of hers, and trying to keep backbenchers on board. When Boris Johnson then inherited this situation, he inherited it also with what is a great deal of sort of swagger and bravado, and also a determination from a political point of view to use that tension to sort of create this very binary situation, this sort of very binary story to tell the public that he's trying to solve Brexit and Parliament is only trying to argue about it. Of course, a huge contention as to whether or not that's true, but he's absolutely tried to sort of divide and conquer.
The crown just taken into the robing room there by the Marquis of Cholmondeley, who is in charge of the royal parts of the Palace of Westminster, by which I mean the robing room and the Royal Gallery, and joint ownership or joint responsibility, if you like, for the Westminster Hall with the Sergeant at Arms and indeed with Blackrod as well. So there's a kind of shared responsibility for the Westminster Hall part, which is the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster. So the Marquis of Cholmondeley will be there to greet the Queen, along with the Duke of Norfolk, who is the Earl Marshal, one of the great officers of state. That will be happening very shortly, because I'm told that the Queen is about to leave Buckingham Palace in the next few minutes, which means that she'll be at Westminster, well, easily within 10 minutes of leaving the palace, just along the Mall and down through Horse Guards, and then along to Parliament Square, and then to Parliament itself. Here in the studio, do we agree with Laura's assessment of the way that hostility has developed between Parliament and government? And I'll go to you, Jenny, first.
I do agree with that. And one of the reasons is, as Laura says, the swagger and the lack of attempt of the Prime Minister to reach out to anybody but those who agree wholeheartedly with him on every issue. But another reason is the procedures in the House of Commons just aren't geared up for these kinds of situations. I sat on the Procedure Committee for 5 years, and one of the things we kept reminding ourselves of is that this is all about the rules that are there are generally about trying to get the government to get its will, and that no longer applies.
Well, we're talking about what some people say is swagger. Let's look at the scene inside the Royal Gallery, because there we have the familiar figure of Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is the Lord President and leader of the House of Commons, known by some of his friends as the Right Honourable Member for the 18th century, for reasons that I can't quite work out. So he is ready to greet the Queen, who, as we can see, is now leaving the precincts of Buckingham Palace in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, which, though it looks very old and ancient, it isn't. It's quite a new coach. It was made in 2010, just in readiness for the Diamond Jubilee, and made mainly built in Australia. Now this carriage, which is carrying the Queen and the Duchess of Cornwall and the Prince of Wales today, has been described to me by the palace as a bit of a mobile museum of Britain and the Commonwealth, because it's made with all kinds of sections of timber from famous old ships in the Navy and from different buildings, including Holyrood, by the way, and Palace of Westminster and other places, and indeed Salisbury and Lincoln and Canterbury Cathedral. So that's part of the woodwork inside the very modern carriage, which I'm sure the Queen prefers, because this one, unlike many of the others, has a bit of heating inside, and it's more comfortable cushion-wise. It's got a smoother ride, and it's got all the new gizmos in it. So although it looks traditional and kind of 18th century, and it's a great sight, it has to be said, it is the most modern of the royal coaches. State trumpeter, the House of Cavalry, sounding the royal salute. So the Queen, who celebrated her 93rd birthday in April this year, being accompanied to the state opening of 2019 by Prince of Wales, the longest serving heir apparent in British history and the longest serving Prince of Wales that's ever been in the history of the UK, and the Duchess of Cornwall, who for the last 6 years now has been accompanying the Prince of Wales to the state opening of Parliament, and a sovereign's escort provided as usual by the House of Cavalry, the Life Guards and the Blues and Royals. So making their way from Buckingham Palace on this rather wet day in October to head towards Admiralty Arch along the Mall, on the fringes there of St James's Park, past the Canada Gate, and along the Mall up towards Horse Guards, on that relatively short journey down to the Houses of Parliament and the Palace of Westminster. A very familiar processional route for the Queen, and of course for everyone watching, because this is the processional route that we see on all kinds of royal occasions, including the Queen's birthday parade, which takes place in June, and other big events too, including royal weddings and indeed royal celebrations of all kinds. We were talking about relations between Parliament and the executive. What's your take, Ed?
Well, I've never known them so bad, and I actually think it's revealed something about our politics. I think our politics is broken. I think Europe has divided the Labour Party and the Conservative Party in ways we've not seen before. I think it means that the way we've worked in Parliament before over the years is really being brought in disrepute. I've had constituents who've been surprised about how Parliament works, how the government tries to dominate Parliament and doesn't allow Parliament to set its own agenda. I think that's been exposed. And I think the case for political reform, Liberal Democrats and others have argued for many years. I think that is now getting a bigger hearing than we've seen. And actually, we've also seen something positive. Let's look at the other side of the ledger. We've seen parties working together, opposition parties and actually MPs from the governing party working in the national interest, Parliament trying to represent the people. And one thing I found really quite distasteful and disturbing is how Number 10 has tried to suggest that Parliament is against the people. I think that sort of language is the language used by despotic people around the world and doesn't do a leader of a democracy any service. And I think people watching this programme, and I think the British public, should reject that sort of division that the Prime Minister has tried to sow.
That's pretty tough criticism, Andrew.
Yeah, very tough. So two issues there. The first is that we are in this position, the executive versus Parliament, because of the bravado of the current Prime Minister and the attitude he's taken. I would remind friends here that actually, under the former Prime Minister, we did reach out to the opposition. We were engaged in meaningful discussions with the opposition, and it wasn't the Conservative Party that broke off.
No one
those
believes
discussions.
that.
It was the Labour Party that broke off.
Or the SNP.
Yeah, but we were open to working with
not
enemies
true.
to find a way through. And the idea that we should stop talking about Parliament versus the people, yes, I agree, actually, some of the language that has been used has been completely out of order, and we all, I think, have a responsibility to speak in measured tones. But how can it be otherwise when the British people who voted 3.5 years ago to leave the EU sees Parliament stopping what they voted for from actually happening?
It's been the Brexiteers who've stopped it. Let's be fair, Andrew.
Okay.
Liberal Democrats have always opposed it. We've been consistent. But Brexiteers can't agree what Brexit means. That's what's been the problem. And that's been Brexiteers in the Conservative Party disagreeing with each other.
Yes, Joanna.
Also, the Parliament is also elected by the same electorate that voted in the 2016 referendum.
Yes.
So just let me finish. There's been a general election and a European election since that referendum, and they have thrown up results which tend to suggest that maybe there isn't the firm majority for leave that your current leader, who you have yourself have described as somebody who's full of bravado, suggests that there is. And I wholly disagree with you that the previous Prime Minister, with whom you worked closely, reached out to the opposition. She may have reached out to the Labour Party right at the very end of the day.
Barely.
I'm sure you'll have comments to make about that, Jenny, but what I can tell you is this: she never reached out to the Scottish Government. She routinely...
Well, the Scottish Government made clear from day one that we'd never...
The Scottish Government was the first government in these islands to put forward a proposal for how Brexit might be done by way of a compromise. That was ignored. Every time the Scottish Government and Parliament, not just the SNP, the Scottish Parliament have taken steps to try and protect Scotland from the consequences of the Tories' machinations, they have been frustrated by your government. And that is reflected in the plummeting of your party in the polls in Scotland, and the polls over the weekend, which now show a majority of people in Scotland want a second independence referendum and would vote yes if there was one.
I'll bring Andrew back in on that, because the Scottish Nationalist Party's sister party is Plaid Cymru, and I'm going to join Vicky, who has Plaid Cymru MP Liz Saville-Roberts with her.
Yeah, that's right. The view from Plaid Cymru, of course, one of those parties pushing for a second referendum. Liz Saville-Roberts is with me. Of course, the Queen's speech today, but all eyes really on whether Boris Johnson can secure a Brexit deal. Is there any kind of Brexit deal that you would vote for?
We do know today that this is so much Johnsonian electoral claptrap, frankly. Everybody's expectation is what needs to be done with Brexit. And because my party supports and has always supported a people's vote, well, of course we will need something to put down on that vote in that case. But that is in all honesty what we should be talking about today. This is just so much side noise. Noise is off when the real matter is what we should be facing with Brexit. And we're talking about a matter of days now.
So come Saturday, when this place will be sitting, very unusually on Saturday, if Boris Johnson has secured a deal, what would you propose to do then?
Well, whatever happens on Saturday, one way or the other, what I sincerely hope will be happening is that there will be a means of putting down, either on the face of the bill or as an amendment, a confirmatory referendum. So that actually we then go back to the country, because we know how divided this is for everybody. And now that we know certainly we know what Theresa May was proposing, we certainly know an awful lot more about what Remain actually means. We don't yet know what the Prime Minister is proposing. I'm not too sure even if Number 10 does, or if it's different things to different people, if he has something clear to offer on that. But nonetheless, the final line, the bottom line, is that people out there need to vote on their futures.
You say and you think that a referendum would sort this divisive issue. Surely it's the opposite, isn't it? To rerun a referendum when we've already had one, and this place has been unable to deliver on the original result. How will holding a second one help?
Well, we had a referendum in, 2016. We had another election in 2017, only 2 years before the one previously. We know now far more than we knew in 2016. All of us know probably far more than we ever thought we would ever want to know. It does seem to me that if we're looking to affect and influence our children, our grandchildren's futures, now that there is a clear offer on the table, be that an offer from the past or whatever the Prime Minister can actually manage to cook up between now and, we're talking about Wednesday, 2 days from now, if there's something clear, then surely everybody, now that we know what is being offered, we deserve to have a say on that.
OK, Liz Saville-Roberts, thank you very much indeed. So really that throws ahead to Saturday, where there looks set to be a move to try and get another referendum. The big question, have the numbers shifted? Because previously that option has been rejected by the House of Commons.
Vicky, thanks very much again. And here we are, the scene in Whitehall, because the Queen's carriage has just passed through Horseguards Arch, and it's now well on its way down Whitehall to pass the Cenotaph and approach Parliament Square. Parliament Square, of course, which has been the focal point of so many protests in recent months, not just on Brexit, but in terms of climate change and other things too. But I think you'll find today that Parliament Square is rather quieter, because police have cleared away lots of the crowds who've been there over the last few months. But certainly a very high temperature among lots of the protesters and demonstrators that we've been meeting in Parliament Square and surrounding Parliament, I suppose, since the start of the year. And people regularly been there protesting about what's going on. So the Queen approaching, and there we have the site of the Cenotaph, which of course is the focal point of the United Kingdom on Remembrance Sunday, which will be next month, and passing Downing Street itself, which is just on the left there. So passing Boris Johnson's residence for the past 3 months, past the Scottish office, which is a Dover House, as we know, Joanna, and the Welsh office, if I may say so, Gwydir House, and the entire kind of geography of Whitehall, including the Department of Health on the right-hand side, and then Foreign Office and the Treasury on the left-hand side as well. And a great sight of the taxi light there for the House of Commons, by the way, just in the foreground, and then the magnificent sight of the Household Cavalry, the lifeguards, red tunics, white plumes, gleaming helmets, and the magnificent horses making their way towards the Palace of Westminster itself. Guard of Honour provided at the Palace of Westminster by the 1st Battalion Welsh Guards and the band of the Welsh Guards, captained by Major Stuart Halliday, beg your pardon, who's the Director of Music of the Welsh Guards, will be conducting the band. 1st Battalion commanded by Major Chris Davis, providing the Guard of Honour today, and the National Anthem will be sounded as the Queen passes the St Stephen's entrance. We have a representative group of the Royal Marines as well, just there on the left as part of the street lines. band of the Welsh Guards playing the national anthem for the Queen, and as we can see, they're clearly inside the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, accompanied by the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. The Major General commanding all the Household Division on duty today, Major General Ben Bathurst, the Major General Commander of the Household Division London District. And as soon as the Queen arrives inside the Houses of Parliament, crossing into the Sovereign's entrance there and the vast archway that leads into the Sovereign's entrance, there will be an immediate fanfare. And one of the immediate signs that the Queen has arrived at the Palace of Westminster will be seen above the Victoria Tower, where the Union flag will soon be replaced. It'll be taken down and replaced with the Royal Standard. And that'll take place in just a few moments' time, and then the world will know that the Queen is inside the Palace of Westminster, one of the royal palaces, of course, and there's been a royal palace on the site of the Palace of Westminster for around 1,000 years. And as I mentioned earlier, the oldest part of the palace, which survived the Great Fire back in 1834, is Westminster Hall, which is one of the great spaces of the palace itself. So the Royal Standard now flying, and inside the Royal Gallery, we have the doors of the robing room there just to the left of the porch as we look at it, and we have the Earl Marshal, the Duke of Norfolk, the man there on the right, who will be ready for the Queen's arrival in just a few moments, because the Queen's very wisely taking a rather quicker route up to the Norman porch and not using the staircase. Her Majesty being greeted by the Marquis of Cholmondeley and by the Earl Marshal, and being led into the robing room itself, where Her Majesty will get ready for the state procession into the House of Lords. The ladies in waiting following. And while this is going on, lots of activity going on in the rest of the palace. For example, if we go down to the side of the House of Commons, we will have our first sight of the day of the Speaker, who will be making his way as well. And there we have the Inspector of Police waiting for the Speaker's procession through the central lobby. It's a daily occurrence in the Palace of Westminster. And so just the announcement that the Speaker's procession is on its way, while we're also seeing the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall making their way into the robing room. And at some point, of course, in the future, at some point, Prince of Wales himself will be there as monarch, ready for the state opening. Hats off, strangers, is the command from the Metropolitan Police Officer, the mace bearer, and then the Speaker, John Bercow, who's played such a prominent and, it's fair to say, controversial role in the political process of the last few years. He's making his way down through the members' lobby of the House of Commons into the chamber of the House of Commons itself, where there will be the usual daily prayers of the Speaker's chaplain. And no one in any doubt that the Speaker is approaching after all of those shouts. some members of the Commons there lining the way, with officers of the parliamentary staff too, and Winston Churchill there on the left and David Lloyd George on the right, the two great Prime Ministers, flanking the entrance to the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker approaches the chair. In what is his last state opening, given that he's announced his retirement plans. Back in the Royal Gallery, we're awaiting the Queen and the Prince of Wales for the royal procession. And there we have our first sight of Black Rod, Lady Usher of the Black Rod, the first time ever in the 650-year history of the post, Sarah Clarke, and she's responsible for security and management in the House of Lords, formally taking on the duties in 2018. So it's her first Queen's speech as well, lots of firsts today. And interestingly for Sarah Clarke, she was previously director of the championships at the All England Lawn Tennis Club, where she was responsible for the organisation of the championship. So no stranger to organising complex events. But this will be a rather different experience. And at the entrance to the robing room, we have the state trumpeters who will be ready to announce the start of the procession itself. There they are in their medieval uniform, unchanged for hundreds of years, ready for the signal from the Earl Marshal and the Marquess of Cholmondeley. And this scene that we're about to enjoy is something that takes us back many centuries. It's known as a procession in state. It's a statement of the sovereign's authority. Processions through the City of London in days gone by, including the heralds and the gentlemen at arms and all of the other people who take part in these processions, and of course the symbols of the sovereign's authority, in this case the imperial state crown and the cap of maintenance and the sword of state. But the kind of procession in state that we're looking at here is unchanged in centuries. Lord Houghton there, the former Chief of Defence Staff, who is taking the sword of state in the procession today. And opposite him, we have Baroness Evans of Bowes Park, who is the leader of the House of Lords. And they are the senior peers who are performing the duty of carrying the regalia today. And as we can see, the state trumpeter sharply focused on the Marquess of Cholmondeley and on the Duke of Norfolk, who will be giving the signal to start the procession itself. The Royal Gallery, with its statues of previous monarchs in the far corner, and then the great paintings on the wall of Wellington's great victories by the artist Daniel Maclise. They dominate the Royal Gallery. It is one of the royal sections of the Palace of Westminster, so it's neutral ground, if you like. It's not part of the partisan areas, including the House of Commons and the precincts of the Commons. It's used by peers to greet guests and even to socialise on some days. And it's always a highlight of any visit to the Palace of Westminster to have a trip through the Royal Gallery, which of course in normal times doesn't have this seating there at all. It's a great open expanse, and it's one of the most impressive and splendid spaces in the palace itself, and that is saying something, because the robing room itself, with its Arthurian portraits, is a beautiful room. A couple of years ago, I was in there listening to former President Carter give an address on the kind of contribution that the UN can make and what he thought of that, and the contribution indeed that he could make in health terms across the world. So President Carter, just one of the former heads of state who's been in Parliament to give addresses either in the robing room or in the Royal Gallery itself. There have been some exceptions to that, of course. Some heads of state have been allowed to address both Houses of Parliament in Westminster Hall. That's seen to be an even greater honour because of the historical resonance of Westminster Hall itself. So we're within seconds, I think, of the Queen's emergence from the robing room and the fanfare by the state trumpeters to tell us that this state opening of Parliament of 2019 is to get underway. The Guards of Honour, provided by the Yeomen of the Guard in the Royal Gallery, still in place after they marched in well over half an hour ago. The heralds, who are facing the robing room as we look, ready to turn and lead into the Prince's chamber, into the House of Lords. And we'll see the gentlemen at arms as well featuring in that procession a little later on. We'll have the heads of the armed forces, the Air Force and the Navy, and the Army, and they will be taking part as well. And we'll see some of the senior political leaders who will be gathered in the House of Lords when the Queen's speech gets underway. And as I say, one of the most, I suppose, dramatic and familiar sections of the day is when the Queen arrives in the House of Lords and gives the signal to summon members of the House of Commons. And that is when Black Rod, the new Black Rod, Sarah Clarke, will get her attempt to go down and savour the atmosphere, if you like, in the House of Commons and see what kind of welcome she gets when she arrives there in a few minutes' time to summon the Speaker and the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and they will all walk together through the central lobby and up to the bar of the House of Lords, that's to say the entrance point of the House of Lords, to witness the speech itself. Marquis of Cholmondeley, whose job it is today to carry the crown, normally worn by the Queen, but not today, and to carry the crown at the head of the procession. And there we have the Queen's official consort today, the Prince of Wales, who will be 71 next month, having served almost a lifetime as heir to the throne and as Prince of Wales. The Queen was attended so many of these state openings, apart from a few over the years, but the vast majority of them. And will know exactly where every single member of the pageantry and the ceremonial is meant to be, and has a very sharp eye for the detail of the entire thing. I'm told that she misses nothing along the way, so there'll be lots of nerves there among the yeomen and all the others about exactly where they're standing and exactly how they're holding themselves. The train bearers who've been specially chosen, and then of course we have the principal members of the procession, including the captain of the Gentlemen at Arms and the captain of the Yeomen of the Guard, who also feature in the procession today. And passing the Gentlemen at Arms who are lining the Prince's chamber, providing a guard of honour in the Prince's chamber, a short walk through past the statue of Queen Victoria just on the left there, past the portrait of Henry VIII and the other Tudor monarchs, and into this magnificent chamber of the House of Lords, the masterpiece of Barry and Pugin. Queen will approach and take her place on the throne of the House of Lords, with the Prince of Wales Next to her, the crown will be placed on the table. The Duchess of Cornwall will take a place on the state chair that's been put there on the right-hand side. And the first thing that we'll hear from the Queen is an invitation to the members of the House of Lords and guests to be seated.
My Lords, pray be seated.
Crown being placed, the Queen will signal her approval for Black Rod. Marquis Cholmondeley gives his signal with his stave of office, and the signal has been received by the Lady Usher of the Black Rod, Sarah Clark, in her first state opening, so a very big moment for her, taking part in one of the most famous pieces of parliamentary ceremonial that we have. Making her way down from the central lobby, Black Rod is announced, and approaching the members' lobby of the House of Commons, where the members congregate, and approaching the door of the Commons, which will be slammed in her face as a sign of the authority of the House of Commons. Three very firm knocks.
Black Rod!
And she enters. Will there be any heckling? There might be.
Mr. Speaker, the Queen commands this Honourable House to attend Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
I don't know.
Some words of dissent there, and no prizes for guessing who they came from. The veteran Labour MP for Bolsover, Dennis Skinner, who specialises in a bit of heckling on these events. And there we have the first time Boris Johnson as Prime Minister walking with Jeremy Corbyn, the Leader of the Opposition, on this Queen's Speech Day. Ian Blackford of the SNP, Liz Savile-Roberts of Plaid Cymru, members of the Cabinet and the Labour front bench, including John McDonnell, all of them walking in, not quite in a rush, but certainly there's always a bit of jostling, I have to say, when it gets to the middle and back of the queue, because they know that unless they jostle, they won't get anywhere near the House of Lords. Nick Brown, the Chief Whip for Labour, Andrea Leadsom for the Conservatives, Sajid Javid there, the Chancellor, who says he'll be delivering a budget next month. And Laura, a bit of chatting going on.
Between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, it doesn't look like they're agreeing on very much. Boris Johnson trying to have a bit of a chinwag there, and Jeremy Corbyn, eyes firmly fixed forward. It's just occurring to me, watching them come through, they have even less in common than Jeremy Corbyn had with Theresa May.
So there you have the crush, look at it. 650 MPs trying to get out of the House of Commons all at the same time. By tradition, some will stay behind in the Commons, they won't go. Michael Ellis there for the Conservatives. And James Cleverly there. There's Joe Johnson, also Conservatives. Mike Gapes, with Nicky Morgan. And here we are. So here we have the new Lord Chancellor, Robert Buckland, who has the speech in his ceremonial purse. We'll present it to the Queen. Steps back one and then turns around.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October. My government intends to work towards a new partnership with the European Union based on free trade and friendly cooperation. My ministers will work to implement new regimes for fisheries, agriculture and trade, seizing the opportunities that arise from leaving the European Union. An immigration bill ending free movement will lay the foundation for a fair, modern and global immigration system. My government remains committed to ensuring that resident European citizens who have built their lives in and contributed so much to the United Kingdom have the right to remain. The bill will include measures that reinforce this commitment. Steps will be taken to provide certainty, stability, and new opportunities for the financial services and legal sectors. My government's new economic plan will be underpinned by a responsible fiscal strategy, investing in economic growth while maintaining the sustainability of the public finances. Measures will be brought forward to support and strengthen the National Health Service, its workforce and resources, enabling it to deliver the highest quality care. New laws will be taken forward to help implement the National Health Service's long-term plan in England and to establish an independent body to investigate serious healthcare incidents. My government will bring forward proposals to reform adult social care in England to ensure dignity in old age. My ministers will continue work to reform the Mental Health Act to improve respect for and care of those receiving treatment. My government is committed to addressing violent crime and to strengthening public confidence in the criminal justice system. New sentencing laws will see that the most serious offenders spend longer in custody to reflect better the severity of their crimes. Measures will be introduced to improve the justice system's response to foreign national offenders. My government will work to improve safety and security in prisons and to strengthen the rehabilitation of offenders. Proposals will be brought forward to ensure that victims receive the support they need and the justice they deserve. Laws will be introduced to ensure that the parole system recognizes the pain to victims and their families caused by offenders refusing to disclose information relating to their crimes. A new duty will be placed on public sector bodies, ensuring they work together to address serious violence. Police officers will be provided with the protections they need to keep the population safe. They will also be awarded the power to arrest individuals who are wanted by trusted international partners. My government will bring forward measures to protect individuals, families, and their homes. Legislation will transform the approach of the justice system and other agencies to victims of domestic abuse and minimize the impact of divorce, particularly on children. My ministers will continue to develop proposals to improve internet safety and will bring forward laws to implement new building safety standards. My ministers will ensure that all young people have access to an excellent education, unlocking their full potential and preparing them for the world of work. My government will take steps to make work fairer, introducing measures that will support those working hard. To help people plan for the future, measures will be brought forward to provide simpler oversight of pension savings. To protect people's savings for later life, new laws will provide greater powers to tackle irresponsible management of private pension schemes. To ensure that the benefits of a prospering economy reach every corner of the United Kingdom, my ministers will bring forward a national infrastructure strategy. This will set out a long-term vision to improve the nation's digital, transport and energy infrastructure. New legislation will help accelerate the delivery of fast, reliable and secure broadband networks to millions of homes. An aviation bill will provide for the effective and efficient management of the United Kingdom's airspace. Proposals on railway reform will be brought forward. A white paper will be published to set out my government's ambitions for unleashing regional potential in England and to enable decisions that affect local people to be made at a local level. My government is committed to establishing the United Kingdom as a world leader in scientific capability and space technology. Increased investment in science will be complemented by the development of a new funding agency, a more open visa system, and an ambitious national space strategy. My ministers remain committed to protecting and improving the environment for future generations. For the first time, environmental principles will be enshrined in law. Measures will be introduced to improve air and water quality, tackle plastic pollution, and restore habitats so plants and wildlife can thrive. Legislation will also create new legally binding environmental improvement targets. A new world-leading independent regulator will be established in statute to scrutinize environmental policy and law, investigate complaints, and take enforcement action. Proposals will also be brought forward to promote and protect the welfare of animals, including banning imports from trophy hunting. The integrity and prosperity of the Union that binds the four nations of the United Kingdom is of the utmost importance to my government. My ministers will bring forward measures to support citizens across all the nations of the United Kingdom. My government remains committed to working with all parties in Northern Ireland to support the return of devolved government and to address the legacy of the past. My government will take steps to protect the integrity of democracy and the electoral system in the United Kingdom. My government will continue to invest in our gallant armed forces. My ministers will honour the Armed Forces Covenant and the NATO commitment to spend at least 2% of national income on defence. As the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, my government will ensure that it continues to play a leading role in global affairs, defending its interests and promoting its values. My government will be at the forefront of efforts to solve the most complex international security issues. It will champion global free trade and work alongside international partners to solve the most pressing global challenges. It will prioritize tackling climate change and ensuring that all girls have access to 12 years of quality education. Members of the House of Commons, estimates for the public services will be laid before you. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, other measures will be laid before you. I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
The Lord Chancellor approaches Her Majesty and takes delivery of the speech, puts it back in the official purse and makes his way back down the steps. The Queen having delivered the Queen's speech to open this new session of Parliament in 2019. The Prince of Wales looking on next to Her Majesty, and the pages of honour are now ready for the procession back to the robing room, where the Queen will prepare to leave the Palace of Westminster and return to Buckingham Palace. Members of the judiciary, very prominent in the House of Lords today, and the bishops too. We saw glimpses of them earlier, including the former Bishop of London, Dr. Richard Charters, and others, also taking their places. And many former government ministers from the House of Commons, of course, who have become life peers with a wealth of experience in terms of parliamentary and political affairs, who've seen many of these ceremonies in the past, and we spoke to two of them earlier, Lord Fowler, who's here today, and Dame Margaret Beckett, who is still in the House of Commons. So as the crown is being carried out, my guests are still with me here. Let's stay on the pictures, but I'll bring in my colleague Laura Kuenssberg, our political editor, just for a thought there on the content of the speech that the Queen has just delivered.
A very long shopping list of all the things that Boris Johnson would like to do. Some of them very much bread and butter issues, whether that's more funding for schools or trying to spend more money on the NHS, or coming up with, at long last, a new way of organising care for the elderly, which is something that successive governments have struggled to grapple with. But the unsaid reality, of course, as well as that shopping list, is that the biggest question hanging over is what Her Majesty said with great certainty at the beginning of the speech: we will be leaving the European Union at the end of this month. There's no way that anyone in this square mile can be sure that that will happen. And whether it happens and how it happens is a much bigger influence than anything that we've just heard being said.
That was literally the first sentence of the speech.
Indeed, because it's the government's first priority. But there is nothing at this stage that the government is setting out in legislation that will either make that less or more likely. That will all come down, first of all, to the outcome of talks this week in Brussels, and then what Parliament does with either a deal or lack of one in the next few days. And with, as these moments of history unfold in front of us, something much more unusual, at this weekend we expect Parliament to be gathering to try to make head or tail of what actually happens next.
That'll be on Saturday, of course, and as you were mentioning earlier, Laura, that'll be the first Saturday sitting in nearly 40 years. The MPs are now making their way back to the House of Commons as the Queen makes her way into the robing room. And having listened to that speech, lots of them, including many backbenchers, making their way back. Diana, but there, of course, a frontbencher. Rose Hudson-Wilkins there, the Speaker's chaplain, next to the Prime Minister. And the rush back to the Commons chamber, because, of course, the debate on the Queen's speech will start in a short while. Sir Alan Duncan, the former Foreign Office Minister, we saw the former Attorney General Dominic Grieve, and here we have Mr. Speaker Bercow. And just a word then, Laura, at this point about his role in all of this, because of course he's announced that he's going, but his role in this Brexit process has turned out to be very, very significant.
It's been very significant and it's been very controversial. I mean, look, let's be clear about what's happened in the last few years. Both sides of the argument, both former Remainers and Leavers, have pushed the rules, let's put it that way. And many people who support Brexit have seen or suggested and felt very strongly that John Bercow has allowed the opposition parties and some Conservatives who want to try to stay in the European Union to push the rules of Parliament too far. Now, of course, many people would dispute that. I'm sure he would dispute that very strongly himself if he ever gave interviews, which he does very, very rarely. But there's no question that on all sides we've seen all sorts of conventions and precedents being broken, all sorts of fascinating, very unusual interplay between the courts and Parliament, not just under Boris Johnson, but of course when Theresa May was still in Parliament. If we go back, if we rewind a while, when she was Prime Minister, we can see her just talking to the now Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. At that point, her government didn't even want to give Parliament a meaningful vote on how we were going to leave the European Union. That, of course, ended up in the Supreme Court, what now feels about a century ago.
Yeah.
It was only in January 2017, and now we are set again, not just for political clashes of epic proportion over the next few days, but it's quite likely that once again this will all end up in the courts.
Yeah. Give a penny for Theresa May's thoughts today.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, I can quite imagine. I mean, for her and her team, one of whom, her former team, is sitting with us in this residence room today. You know, they sweated blood and tears to come up with a deal with the European Union. It failed catastrophically to pass. It is possible that something not too dissimilar to her deal may well end up being put before MPs very soon. The difference, of course, people believe, which frankly is the reason why Conservatives who don't necessarily like him very much, but allowed Boris Johnson to take place in number 10, is that he, as the chief cheerleader for Brexit, would be the one who'd be able to sell that to this place. But, you know...
Yeah, the very point, Andrew, I wanted to put to you, because given your experience of working with Theresa May, it's not the penny for the thoughts, but it's just the idea that the deal that might emerge may well not be that different to the deal that Mrs May worked so hard to put together and was comprehensively and repeatedly rejected. So, you know, for those of you who worked alongside, that must be rather galling, surely.
I wouldn't say galling. I think it was a very good deal. The deal that Theresa worked very hard with others to put before this House, as Laura so kindly reminded us, it catastrophically failed to pass on 3 occasions. However, this is not going to be the same deal. It is going to be a different deal. It's a deal that's being worked on right now in negotiations between the British government and the European Union, and it's a deal that I think not only can pass, I think has to pass, so that we can get over this this roadblock, get through this impasse, and move on. Actually, start delivering what's a really good, ambitious, and positive agenda as set out by Her Majesty in the House of Lords a few minutes ago.
Jenny, there must be some stuff in that Queen's speech that you could support.
Well, I'm all for people who are dangerous criminals staying in prison for longer. But I mean, I feel like this is a government that's really run out of steam already, and it's only just started. We've got stuff on sentencing, we've got some residual work from the withdrawal agreement bill that needs to go through around fisheries, agriculture and trade. But there's nothing there on alleviating poverty, nothing on productivity, nothing on preventing the causes of crime, nothing on early years education. You know, things that we really need to tackle as a country, and they want to talk about sentencing. Well, fine, we'll do that, but then can we do our real jobs, please?
Queen is just thanking those who've been taking part in the state opening today, as she always does. And this is a moment, I must say, when we certainly miss the presence of the Duke of Edinburgh, who was very keen to thank people at this point, but as I said earlier, no longer undertaking public duties of that kind. So the Queen is preparing to leave the palace. Jenny, you were telling us there about some of the things that you wished were in there, and I'm going to ask you the same thing, really, Joanna, which is, you know, there must be things in this that you could happily vote for.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I welcome, the idea that there should be consequences for those who irresponsibly manage private pension funds. I think we could all get behind that. But I would also like to see some money for the WASPy women who have been so unfairly treated. Again, they've been overlooked. But look, if this speech hadn't been read out by Her Majesty the Queen, then you might as well have just said this is a party political broadcast for the Conservative Party. It is a list of things that they think will win them votes in England, very much a domestic policy agenda for England, ignoring the elephant in the room of Brexit, apart from the first sentence, which I agree with what Laura had to say about that. No recognition of the needs and requirements of Scotland in relation to, for example, immigration. It is well documented that Scotland in particular requires immigration and benefits from freedom of movement. What we have is a bill to remove freedom of movement. That is not progressive, it is regressive.
I'll come to you for an answer, Andrew, but Ed, your take on the speech?
Disappointing. I'd like to see far more on climate change. He put it at the end as an international issue to deal with other people. We've got lots to do in this country. It should have been right in the middle of this Queen's speech. I think the measures on education were really poor. If we're really going to tackle the education issues in our country, we need to be spending a lot more money on it. We need to look at issues like early learning, as Jenny said, childcare. Lots of issues there which Liberal Democrats would have had, but which were completely absent. And to be honest, this is a fantasy Queen's speech. I've never known a Queen's speech where it's less likely to be enacted. We all know that this is just behind the backdrop of Brexit, and as you said earlier, the key issues, will Brexit be implemented? And I don't think this Prime Minister will be able to do that unless he genuinely works with the parties, and we've not seen that from him before.
Queen is leaving. So the Sovereign's procession, with the Sovereign's escort of the Household Cavalry making its way back along the road there to Parliament Square and along Whitehall, through Horse Guards and back to Buckingham Palace, all of which signifies, of course, that the state opening of 2019 has been completed, though there are a few formalities still to come, including, for example, the departure of the Crown, which is about to take place with the Controller of the Lord Chamberlain's office, Michael Vernon, who's new to this post, and this was his first state opening. So the Crown will leave, and so will the other insignia, the cap of maintenance and the sword of state. They will get a formal departure as well from the Palace of Westminster, and that will be the formal end, if you like, of the state proceedings today, as politics then kicks in again. And I suppose at that point, Andrew, I'd say to you, for the Conservatives, people are very happy to recognise around this table today that there are elements in this which are attractive, and there are elements in this which are desirable, even if they don't get everything they would like to see, because everyone has different political needs. It's just the deliverability of it. It's just the reality of it, or the lack of reality of it, and the fact that, you know, given the circumstances we're in, you genuinely are not in a position to deliver any of this, given the current climate. Now, that's what viewers will find puzzling.
Yeah, of course, but viewers should remember that this government was forced into this position by the House of Commons refusing to grant the government's wishes to go to a general election. We started this programme talking about how it is usual to have a general election and then a Queen's speech outlining a programme for government. We were precluded from doing that because the House of Commons refused to go to the country to actually test what this government was offering with the people. And so we are here today with the Queen's speech, which, as you said, would be very difficult to deliver. But wouldn't it be great if we could? If we could deliver Brexit on the 31st of October and then go on and deliver this really ambitious and positive agenda for this country. And to turn to Joanna's comments about ignoring the needs of the people of Scotland, you know, the immigration bill that will come forward will be a really positive immigration bill for the entire country. Freedom of movement, of course, is ending because we're leaving the European Union, and with our leaving the EU ends freedom of movement. But I personally would like to see an expansion of the seasonal worker scheme pilot. Joanna's right, we absolutely do have needs and priorities in Scotland that are different to the rest of the United Kingdom, and that's why I would like to see an expansion of the seasonal worker scheme where we can attract the workers to Scotland that we need to keep the economy thriving. And of course also Scotland will benefit through the Barnett consequentials with the increased investment in the NHS and schools and infrastructure, everything that will mean in terms of the uplift to the Scottish Government's budget to spend on the priorities that they see that Scotland need north of the border.
As we see the Crown and the regalia leaving, Laura, I'm bringing you back in and ask you point blank whether you think Ed is justified in saying that this is a fantasy Queen's speech. Is that going too far?
I think it's a colourful way of describing it, but I think it's certainly, shall we say, a Queen's speech from a parallel universe where Boris Johnson, where Boris Johnson gets his way, where Boris Johnson is able to get a deal with Brussels, definitely done by the end of this week, definitely through Parliament on Saturday with a thumbs up, thumbs down, meaningful vote, definitely then getting through all the Brexit legislation that has to happen after that, and then definitely being able to get his way and have a general election within a few weeks, and then definitely getting a Conservative majority.
Right.
So a lot of hurdles to get over in that kind of Downing Street dream scenario. But I think we shouldn't dismiss too much the idea that this just doesn't mean anything. It does mean something. What it means is this is what we are likely to see as the basis of a Conservative manifesto in the election that will come sooner rather than later. But I would caution, everybody at the moment is working on, could it be December the 5th? Could it be the last week of November we'll get into an election? Things have been so topsy-turvy around here in the last few weeks. There are some people in government who just still say, I don't think it will happen this side of Christmas now. Now, the conventional wisdom is that it will, because the government doesn't want to go on like this. There is a suggestion, particularly among the opposition parties, that the SNP is keen to push for a vote of no confidence to have an election more rapidly than the Labour Party is. So there are sort of tensions there, but nothing's certain. Nothing is certain at all.
What's your hunch on election timing, Jenny?
I mean, I'm listening to what Laura's saying. I think she might have a point, but my sense is, having listened to that, that's clearly a pitch to the country, weak though it is. And I think that we need an election, and it needs to happen fairly shortly, because
Does that
we
mean
just
Labour
can't
will
carry on.
eventually come round to saying we need one?
It's not that Labour doesn't want
Demanding
one. It's just we wanted
And
to
backing
prevent
calls for
no
one.
deal. I mean, this has all been about making sure this Prime Minister doesn't take us off a cliff. But once that's been assured, however that assurance may come about, then we just have to have an election. We've got to move this country forward. That Queen's speech won't do it, and the people need a chance to pick something better.
What's likely to happen on Saturday in that emergency session? What will MPs, viewers will want to know, what will you be asked to do on Saturday? What is the function of Saturday?
Well, if the Prime Minister brings back a deal, that will be debated and voted upon, and then subsequent to that vote depends an awful lot.
Right.
Of course, if he doesn't have a deal, he's required under the Benn Act, which had cross-party support, to ask the House of Commons if they want a no deal. I'm pretty sure that will be rejected, because it will be absolutely disastrous for our country. And then he will be forced by Parliament to ask the European Union for an extension. If he does that, the real question then is it election or a referendum? Liberal Democrats believe that the referendum is the better option to solve the question that has paralysed Parliament and paralysed our country. A general election would involve inevitably other issues. A referendum is a clear question, and whether there's a deal or not a deal, that clearly is the right way, so we can put this back to the people with all of what we know now, and then bring this to a head and get it done.
Saturday, Joanna, what's likely to happen?
Well, I agree with Ed about what the Prime Minister is bound to do in terms of the Benn Act, and of course he has given a solemn assurance to the court in Edinburgh that he will not only do what he's required to do under the Benn Act, but that he won't seek to frustrate its purpose. So all this nonsense that people like Andrea Leadsom have been coming out with about sending a letter requesting an extension, then sending another letter saying we don't really want an extension, that would fly against the promise that the Prime Minister has given to the court. Of course, the court have held the hearing open to the first working day after the 19th, so myself and my colleagues who've raised this petition can go back to court on the 21st if Boris Johnson breaks his promise. So yeah, I mean, but you're right about the SNP position. Once the extension is in the bag, we would like to see a general election. This Queen's speech talked about the government caring about the prosperity and the integrity of the Union. If they cared about the prosperity and the integrity of the Union, they would listen to what voters in Scotland want and what Scotland's Parliament wants. They don't. We're sick of this. We want a general election, and we want to move towards a second independence referendum.
OK, I'll come to Andrew for a final word in a second. I want to go to Vicky, who's in the central lobby with Caroline Lucas.
Yeah, that's right. The view from the Green MP, Caroline Lucas. What is your priority this week, and particularly on Saturday when the House of Commons will be sitting?
Well, actually, my priority right now in the wake of the Queen's speech is on climate change. And if I can just say a few words about that first, because important though Brexit is, the climate emergency is the real question of life and death on this planet, and we've just had 6 words in a subclause. That is all that was afforded to the Queen in her Queen's speech by Boris Johnson. So that is letting down young people massively. Looking forward to Saturday, yes, of course, the big issue is whether we can get a people's vote on that Brexit deal. I think it's absolutely important that this issue goes back to the people for a final say.
Do you think that the numbers in the House of Commons have changed, though? Because as you know, the option of another referendum has been rejected by the House of Commons.
It's been rejected, but it got very, very close. It was within touching distance, and I think that now we're even closer to the cliff edge, if you like. I think more and more MPs are now accepting from both sides of the House, both Labour and Conservative, that the right thing to do here and the way to get the majority is to put the deal back to the people.
Would you be willing to support a caretaker Prime Minister or Jeremy Corbyn in the event that Boris Johnson is voted down in a vote of no confidence?
I have always said that I think that Jeremy Corbyn, as leader of the official opposition, ought to be given the opportunity to lead that caretaker government. So I would absolutely support him in that decision. And it seems to me that we shouldn't be playing party politics at this point. This is about the national interest. The national interest right now is to make sure that that letter gets sent to get the extension to Article 50. I think the national interest is about getting a people's vote, a confirmatory referendum on the deal. And if by doing that we need to support Jeremy Corbyn, then I'd be very glad to do that.
OK, Caroline Lucas, thank you very much indeed. So after the debate today on the Queen's speech, of course, a few days of debate before the House of Commons sits again on Saturday.
Vicky, thank you very much, and thanks to all your guests. Just a couple of minutes to go. I want a sentence from each of my guests, and then we'll end with my colleague Laura on how they would sum up today. What has today amounted to? Andrew, for the Conservatives.
I'd sum it up as being quite exciting. It set out an ambitious, forward-looking, one-nation agenda for this government that we want to deliver once we've delivered Brexit on the 31st of October.
Joanna?
A meaningless and expensive distraction from the broken politics of Brexit Britain.
Concise and clear. Thank you very much. Jenny?
I think this was intended to be the firing of the starting pistol at the beginning of a general election campaign. He's fired a blank. There's not enough there, and you know the country deserves better than this.
Thank you. Ed?
This was a Boris Johnson stunt. Discourteous to Her Majesty, and shows, I think, to your viewers that we have a Prime Minister who can't be trusted.
Where does it leave us for the days to come, Laura, because we've got the summit coming up, and how do you see the rest of this week playing out?
Well, as you suggested, there'll be a couple of days now where MPs will scream and shout over the measures that have been put forward of the Queen's speech, but all eyes really are what will happen at the conclusion of the important summit in Brussels at the end of this week, before a mega day, Super Saturday here, when MPs will be trying to find a way forward. But given the difficulties they've had in doing that over the last couple of years, I wouldn't expect that there's suddenly going to be an outbreak of peace and harmony. But we'll see.
OK, Laura, thanks very much once again. And can I thank all of you for being so constructive and being very happy as well to kind of knit the politics together with the pageantry, because it's not always easy to do. So thank you for being so cooperative with that. That's it from Westminster for now, from the Houses of Parliament. We're inside the House of Lords, actually, just a stone's throw from the chamber itself, where it was all taking place. Thanks to the guests. Coverage of the debate on the Queen's speech will continue, of course, on the BBC News channel this afternoon. There'll be plenty of detail as well on BBC News Online on the individual measures announced in the Queen's speech itself. So plenty of BBC material for you. So we've seen the first state opening of Parliament for 2 years, but it's at least possible that we'll see a second before the end of 2019. Let's see, shall we? From all of the BBC team at Westminster, thanks for watching and goodbye.